Welcome to the introductory edition of Fly Lures. I'm your host, Jody Thibodeau, and I will be bringing this new series to you from Field Quiver Outdoors on a somewhat, hopefully, regular basis. And depending on how long it takes to research the different subjects that are covered, will be the key factor in how much gap there might be in between editions. But the goal is at least one per month initially. But again, that could change. They could be more often. They could be uh, less often, just depending on how much time I have to research the subject matter for each edition. This edition is intended to give you a little bit of background and insight into what you should expect from future editions of both the show, i.e., the video format, podcast format, as well as the other formats that will be released to complement and supplement one another on the same subjects for fly lures. But if you're not watching this, if you're just listening to an audio only format of this podcast, then I would suggest you switch over whenever you have the time and watch the video, whether that's on YouTube or on Spotify, which is, I know Spotify will have the video format of the podcast, but in this edition, I'm going to be explaining some of the things that you will see both in the video formats as well as what you will find in some of the other formats that'll be released on the website, fieldquiveroutdoors.com, at the same time that the video and podcast is released. But we'll get more into what the different formats of fly lure will be here momentarily. But again, if you're not watching, I would suggest you go ahead and switch over to a video format at this point, because I'm going to be going into a slideshow presentation showing different graphics and images that you will be seeing regularly in future editions of fly lures. But feel free to continue just listening to audio. But again, I would strongly encourage you at some point to go to a video format for this edition. Now, the whole point of fly lore is to present information about famous flies. But in addition to highlighting flies so famous that non-anglers will recognize their names, there will also be obscure flies which are unfamiliar to even the most seasoned fly tiers and fishermen that will also be featured, along with some of the sport's other tools and equipment. And on occasion, famous fly anglers and fly tiers themselves. Each edition of Fly Lure will cover the original recipe for the fly being covered, but the focus will be more on the lore behind the lure. It's a fun play on words, which fully embraces the idea of this series if you think about it. Now, normally when one thinks of lore in the context of the outdoors, there's a trend of the mind wandering to entertaining stories told around a campfire involving fictional histories and mythical beings. A fly lore reclaims the true definition of lore, focusing on the knowledge and traditions of the fly lures, tools, and equipment featured in each edition. Now, fly lore will be released in 3 unique formats initially. The first is a video format, and these videos will be released on YouTube and also as a podcast. So you will be able to listen to an audio only version of this same video. There will be a article format, as well as a dossier cover sheet. Now, just to elaborate a little bit more on each of those three formats, as far as the video format, what you can expect to see in that is the actual video that will play, depending on the fly being covered or the tool or other equipment or subject in general, is images and videos of the subject matter will be shown. In some instances, instead of images and videos of already tied flies only being shown, this narration will overlay a video of the fly being tied. Now, when it comes to the article format, uh, an article will be published for each edition on the Field Quiver Outdoors website for anyone who prefers the written word over spoken words. The article's contents will be very comparable to the videos. Sometimes it may be an actual transcript of the audio. However, there may be slightly varying but non-contradictory information between the two formats. And then finally, we have the dossier cover sheet. Now, this will be a printout that's available for free on fieldquiveroutdoors.com. And it takes inspiration from my personal longtime interest in fictional spy and detective novels. So because of this, I decided to kind of meld the two together and design a printable poster that's an 8.5 by 11. So it'll print out on a normal sized sheet of printer paper that would be likened or could be likened to the cover page that you would find in a dossier file. It's also kind of fitting because I've actually been compiling the research for these fly lure subjects in what could be called a stereotypical dossier file folder. Now, for those who would like to compile a collection or even create their own compendium of all of the subjects covered in the fly lore series, or to even create your own, these printouts would be ideal for that. Now, I will go ahead and say that there is rather, a blank copy of that dossier sheet on the website. Again, it's a free download. You can download it and you can fill it in about any fly that you would like and start your own dossier for that particular fly. Now, I'll also include any of the references that I used to compile information for each edition. And if you would like, then feel free to print the dossier, print the resources, and again, start your own notebook with all this information in for you to flip through later on. But some of the knowledge that's to be highlighted will include the who, what, when, where, and why of the fly's development, along with other fun and sometimes useless, what could be considered trivia facts. Now, regarding the tradition aspect for each edition of the series, there will be more in some editions and less in others, depending on how much hard data can be found about each subject. Now, let's go ahead and move into some of the subjects that will be covered. Obviously, the vast majority, without a doubt, will be flies themselves. However, some other possible subjects, like I've already mentioned, that are open for coverage include equipment such as famous fly reel models, equipment, and fly tying tools. Now, if you're looking at the video format, there's an Easter egg here alluding to a couple of future episodes, a particular fly, one specific fly that I intend to cover in an upcoming edition that is made using the two tools shown in this image. And throughout this edition, this introductory edition, there will be a couple of Easter eggs regarding some of the first editions that I've been working on for this series. Now, this is an image of the dossier file. This is the full image. This is what it would look like if you were to print out the blank copy. It has 3 distinct sections and a place for a photo. And I'm going to break down each section just to provide a little bit more information about each of those sections. Now, again, all of this information will be covered in the video and article formats as well. But first off, this top section is your basic core information about the fly, the tool, the equipment, whatever the subject matter is for that edition. First off, you have its name, then any aliases. Now, we'll go ahead and say I have actually decided, since I put this presentation together, there will be a couple of changes over time just to make this dossier page flow better and better terminology that I just like better. So specifically right now, if you're looking at this, you can see that tire is listed. However, that has actually already been updated on the website. You will notice it no longer says tire. If you were to download this blank dossier, it actually says originator. That will be whoever the subject in question is associated with originally developing that fly. The year is whatever year that fly is traced back to its origination point. Now, sometimes some flies, we don't know the exact year that they were originally come up with. They were first tied, first fished. Sometimes it's a decade, sometimes it's a range. So in the research, I'm trying to get it down as close to the exact year as possible. However, sometimes it may be a decade or early 1900s, mid 1900s, just whatever information I can find is what that year will be. But that has to do with when the fly is believed to have first been created. This is the part that some folks are going to have issue with. This is the fly type. I have oversimplified the fly types for the sake of this show into 4 categories. I know there are more than 4 categories, and I know that one of these is technically not even a true category of fly. However, as I've already said, for simplicity's sake, I have narrowed it down to 4 categories. These categories are wet, dry, streamer, and novelty. Now, again, what I'm about to say to define each of these categories, you may disagree with. You may say I'm wrong, and that's fine. But again, this is just for the sake of this series. Any fly which is designed to sink and not be actively retrieved is going to fall under the category of a wet fly. It is intended to be fished under the surface of the water and not actively retrieved. A dry fly is designed to float. Some dry flies, such as poppers, are intended to be fished at the surface level, on the water surface, not below the surface, not to sink, but to still be actively retrieved. Those will fall under the dry category for the purposes of this series. A streamer fly, for the purposes of this series again, is a fly which is designed to be actively retrieved but below the surface. And a novelty fly is designed more for whimsy than reality. And just to give you a couple of examples of each fly type, a wet fly would be a copper john. A dry fly could be a Zud bubbler or a Sam's one bug. A streamer is a Clouser minnow, and a novelty fly would be a Christmas tree. Got it? Good. All right. The original target species is whatever species of fish the originator created the fly with the intent of catching. Its primary original target species. I know some of these flies are great utilitarian flies. They will catch just about anything that swims in the water. But if there was a specific fish that a fly was intended to target, that's what would be listed here. What the fly is intended to emulate or imitate will be listed here. And on the dossier page, it says location. That is the body of water that the fly was originally designed to be fished in. There are some flies that were designed by someone, just as an example. If the fly was designed and tied by someone living in the Northeast United States, but it was intended to target a fish in, I don't know, we'll say the Appalachians. We'll just say the Chattooga River as an example, since that's one of the rivers here close to me. Then the location will be the Chattooga River, because that is where the fly was originally intended to be fished, not where it was actually made in the Northeast United States. Again, that's just an example. Again, with all of this information, the goal is to be as specific as possible, almost like a research paper. So the location, if possible, will be the specific body of water it was originally intended to be fished in. If not, we'll go to region, state, so on and so forth. The next section of the dossier cover page is the original recipe. And again, if you're watching the video, this is a bit of an Easter egg about the first edition that'll be coming out here pretty soon. On all of these pages, even the blank one, I will have hook and thread in the top two locations for you to fill in. Below that, moving left to right, top to bottom, you will have the materials listed in tying sequence. So as an example, just to read it off of this original recipe, you'll have your hook listed at the top, then your thread. Tail, then move to the right for back legs, which are tied in next. Down to hackle, which is tied after the back legs. Then your dubbing would be added. then you would use your glue to attach the body before finally adding the body legs. Now, if you're using a blank printout of this dossier cover page, you can do it in any order you want. This is just the way I chose to do it for me, partially for aesthetics, partially for keeping it in order for myself for whenever I wanted to time in the future if I'm needing to go off of a recipe. Now, you'll also notice here that it says modernizations and updates will be listed in parentheses. This is if the originator has come up with something since they first tied the fly, a substitute for a material. Most commonly, what I have come across is a change in the hook or the thread. Every once in a while, it'll be something else, but typically it's one of those two things. But any changes by the originator will be included in parentheses. Now, one other thing that might be notated in parentheses that was not made by the original tire of a fly would be materials that are no longer legally sourceable. There are some flies which were tied with feathers from songbirds, which legally you can't do that anymore. So keep that in mind when you see what's in parentheses. Last but not least, on these dossier cover pages, you will have lore notes. It's listed as lore notes. And those are going to be just bullet point additions, things of interest that are notable and possibly that they just stood out as something memorable to me while doing my research. If you're filling in your own, put anything you want in there. In the future, I may come up with additional pages to include along with the dossier cover page that are kind of a dossier format just for fun. But last but not least, if you will notice, for those watching the video, in the bottom right corner, there is a blue and copper seal. And this is the Tied and True seal. There are 3 different Tied and True seals that you will see throughout the course of this series. The only difference in them is what is written on the middle bar going across the center. And these function to share the time frame visually of when each fly lore subject originated. So moving from newest to oldest, we'll start with, actually, I take that back. We're going from oldest to newest. We have Timeless Legend, which this is for any subject that originated prior to 1925. Next, we have the Old Timer, which was in the range of 1925 to the end of 1974. And last but not least, we have the Modern Classics, which are anything originating post 1975. Now, hopefully, this series will go on long enough that I'll have to go back and play around with these time frames, but they might not even last that long. I may come up with something better. Who knows? Some of you in the audience may have a suggestion of something that would work better to categorize the time frames for when these different flies or equipments and tools were first developed that will replace these 3 categories. But again, that was just something fun. Another play on words. You'll notice it had Tied and True there going around it. And that, like I said, is a play on the words of the phrase tried and true, because as I've already mentioned multiple times, the majority of these editions will be focused on flies which have been tied and found true and worthy of being tied by other flyers and used to catch fish. Lastly, in this introductory edition, I just want to mention that fly lore is not intended to be an exhaustive collection of facts and legends about the subjects covered in each edition. Instead, the goal is to provide the basic information you'd find shared around a campfire by friends telling what they use to catch their personal best. Now, as each new edition is released, I hope that you enjoy learning the lore behind the lure. And please take a few minutes, if you haven't already, to follow the Field Quiver Outdoors channel on YouTube, as well as the Fly Lore podcast series on whatever podcast streaming service you're listening to me on now, and share the series with some friends. And also, I would be tremendously grateful for any likes, reviews, and suggestions that you might have for any subjects you'd like to see covered in future editions of Fly Lore.